What was I thinking? I suck. Yo, Darius Britt here, and today we're talking about the top 15 mistakes that beginner filmmakers make. I don't know what you're talking about, but I don't make mistakes. There's 15 of them. When you're just starting out at this filmmaking thing, you gotta make some good mistakes in order to get better, and well, there's some common ones that we all seem to make. So, barring the obvious mistakes like bad acting, overexposed shots, lack of focus, I thought I'd take a moment to highlight, if you will, some of these more common mistakes. Let's get into it. So one of the more common problems are characters that lack clear goals, or worst case, they don't have any goals at all. If you want to tell a story that an audience can follow along with, then you need to have a character that has a clear goal. If your audience doesn't understand what your character or your characters are trying to do, then they're going to get confused and then they're going to get bored. I mostly see this with dramatic short films for some reason. You also see it in some action short films. Undercooked scripts are another common problem. You know, the scripts that have a lot of loose ends and nothing completely weaves together and makes sense. This usually happens because people are rushing and they're not taking enough time to get feedback, and they're not rewriting the scripts to make sure that they're as strong as they can be. They just want to jump off into shooting and making a movie. And although that's the fun part, you want to make sure that you have a really strong story so people understand what you're making. So before you press record, make sure that script's as strong as it can be.
We're gonna dress nice tomorrow. I'm being this year's most dedicated.
Huh?
The western side. Okay, I guess that's what I have to do.
I can't hear what they're saying. Why am I not hearing any footsteps? If you have bad sound in your film, that is the first thing your audience will notice. Having bad sound is like a huge red flag that screams out, "I'm an amateur. This guy." Yeah, audiences really don't tolerate bad sound. For instance, if you were to go out and shoot a movie and you shot it completely horribly, but you had great sound quality, audiences will tolerate that because then they'll just assume that the movie was just supposed to look like shit. But if you went out and you made your film and you killed it, great image quality, great lighting, pristine compositions, but your sound quality was horrible, they will not tolerate it. They'll just assume that you're an amateur who doesn't know what the hell he's doing. I know it sucks. I didn't make the rules to the game. I'm just letting you know what game you're playing. You gotta get that sound right. Give it just as much attention as you do those visuals. Get your mics as close to your actors as you possibly can. Get nice, clean sound. Get Foley, get ADR if you need it, but take your time, make sure your sound is good. So no matter how good you think you are, a 16-year-old will never play a convincing drug lord kingpin. And your classmate, who is the same age as you, by the way, will never believably be able to play as, say, your mother. We see this kind of thing all the time, you know. We'll write roles for another gender, another ethnicity, or a completely different age group, and we'll try to cast people who are completely not fitting of that demographic. But there's only so much you can stretch before it just becomes completely unbelievable. So they say that 90% of directing is casting, and oh man, is that true? If you take your time and cast the right actors for your parts, it makes your life a whole lot easier because they'll just have the right sensibilities for the roles. So take your time with casting, cast with care, because it really does make a difference. You can usually find a lot of what's called dead space in beginner's work. Dead space are areas in the frame where there's not a whole lot going on. Actually, there's nothing going on. It's just kind of wasted space.
Sure.
To you. You're too weak in your current state. Go ahead and
believe what they do on chicken farms. So because people...
It doesn't really look very good, and it usually means that somebody's not applying the rule of thirds, they don't know about it, or they're rushing and they're not paying attention to what they're doing. You can use this like guide grid. Most cameras have them. If you're not familiar with using it, then it takes a little practice to get used to using it, but it's a very valuable tool for helping to find balance and symmetry in your compositions. Using the rule of thirds gets you shots like this, and shots like this, and shots like this. Symmetry, balance, attention to detail. Do not just press record. Take your time. Find the symmetry in your locations, the symmetry in your shots. Carefully compose your shots. Another common problem that you see are shots with no depth. You see actors that are filmed up against walls and in corners. Pretty much makes for very boring, flat compositions that are uninteresting to watch. Get your actors away from those walls. Get some depth in your shots. When I'm composing shots, I'm always looking for ways to get more depth. Here are some examples of shots with depth. Notice that there are layers to these shots. Something's happening in the foreground and something's happening in the background. The shots are so much more rich, they're more dynamic, and they're more interesting to look at. If you watch my short film Seafood Tester, you'll notice that there are a few shots where the camera isn't exactly in the same room as the actors. We were deliberately shooting through doorways to catch the action because we were shooting in a very small apartment, so that was one way that we can kind of add depth to our shots. FYI, if you're at a location that has little itty bitty rooms and no room to roam, shoot through doorways. It's a great way to add depth. So I got 2 words for you. Production design. You see white, naked, plain, uninteresting walls everywhere in amateur work.
I just took your advice and I got to eating, bro.
This is my coworker Shirley.
It's like a white prison. It's like a limbo, like an infinite in the Matrix. It's just so mind-bogglingly white and plain. Put some pictures up, put some magazine clippings up, posters, paint the walls, do something, do anything. What if I shot this entire YouTube episode with white walls? Kinda lame, right? Sometimes it can't be avoided and you don't have control over your location, in which case, yes, I get it. But in those instances where you can do something about those white walls, do something about those white walls. When I was in pre-production for my short film Seafood Tester, we're gonna shoot in my apartment, and my apartment had these ugly, plain, naked, flat, uninteresting white walls. So I spent a couple $100 and bought me some paint and paint supplies, and I painted the walls of my apartment so that they'd be more interesting to look at. And please believe it makes a huge difference in the end result. Okay, what just happened? Alright, I can't see anything. Guys, lighting isn't an option, it's a requirement. If people can't see what's going on in your film, they're gonna lose interest. Shots that aren't lit typically look very flat and dull and uninteresting. But please believe, if you know how to light, you can make your super cheap movie look very expensive. If you don't know or understand lighting, there are plenty of resources online where you can get your knowledge up. Film Riot, Basic Filmmaker, behind the scenes footage of Freddie W. and Corridor Digital, American Cinematographer Magazine, behind the scenes footage of any movie that you watch. Insert shots are when you cover a small piece of action that's in the same scene from a different angle or a different focal length, usually kind of to flesh out a scene. Typically, close-ups of small details make up the bulk of insert shots. Noobs tend to have unnecessary insert shots in their work, kind of like this one. We can already see her reaching for the glasses. We don't need a close-up of her hand actually grabbing them. I mean, if her hand went out of frame and then back with glasses, then we could put 2 and 2 together that she grabbed a pair of glasses. What makes it so unnecessary is it's relatively unimportant to the scene. It's not adding anything to the scene. There's no added tension, no added information, no added anything. Close-ups are a very powerful tool, and you must use them very selectively, because every time you use a close-up, you're telling your audience this: you gotta pay very close attention to this thing right here. Super important. Look at it, look at it. It's important, look at it. You paying attention? You paying attention? So if you keep showing your audience close-ups of unimportant things, then sooner or later they'll stop paying attention to your close-ups. And then they'll probably stop paying attention to the rest of your movie too. Now, if we knew that those glasses were in fact a bomb that was gonna blow up in her face, then it would be nice to get a close-up of her grabbing the glasses, because that would build tension. So some people call it shoe leather. There are different names for it, but it's basically when you see people doing uninteresting bits of action that you don't really need to see, like going in and out of doors, or coming in and out of houses, or walking from here to there.
You know, she had the nerve to tell me to leave. See that? Sounds about right.
Lingering on uninteresting bits of action can really slow your movie down. We don't need to see your characters physically walk from place to place. A lot of that excess movement you can cut out and nobody would miss it. And the pacing would be nice and faster, more snappy. So the thing about pauses and silence is it has to be earned. When you have 2 characters talking and interacting in a scene and they take pauses to think or react to things, then it can really help pull your audience into a scene, which is great. But if you do too many of these pregnant pauses and silences for thought and reflection, then it can do the opposite, and it can really slow your scene down, and it can take your audience out of the movie.
Grant, right?
Right.
The other night at the party, you were about to say something.
Yeah. So you stopped me.
You know why I stopped you?
Nope. I just figured you was trying to play me.
I wasn't. So what were you gonna say?
I don't know. Might not be a good idea after all.
Play dumb if you want to. This will be the last time you had this opportunity.
Pretty slow, right? The misconception is that dramatic movies have to be full of pregnant pauses and self-reflective silences, and that's not the case at all. You don't have to have a whole lot of pauses to build tension. One thing you gotta remember, the fewer the pauses you take, the more powerful each pause becomes, so you should be very selective about where you place your moments of silence. So there is way too much standing around going on. You see it all the time, characters having a long conversation standing or sitting in one place, and not only is this boring to watch, but it's also unnatural. You ever notice how much professional actors move around in Hollywood movies? They rarely stand in one place for a long period of time because they use motion to help tell the story.
Put on my keys. I just gotta call the office before they go. Joe, you're gonna be real proud of me. I got good news.
Ted.
Yeah, 1 second, let me just do this.
Movement works wonders. When you move your actors around, it helps keep your scene alive and energized. You'll be surprised at how much more active your scenes become when you really utilize the power of motion. Get your actors moving. Get them doing stuff. Get them active. If you got a scene in the kitchen, then don't just have your actors standing there like mannequins talking. Have one of them, you know, fix a grilled cheese sandwich or something, and have the other one get something out of the refrigerator. Make up business for them to do, but have them do something, because nobody ever just stands in one place and does nothing while they're talking. Now, every story needs a certain amount of dialogue to set things up and get them moving, but there's a common tendency to rely too much on the chit-chat. I mean, some films are all chit-chat, nothing but talking heads. You can replace some of that chatter with action. Do the whole show don't tell thing, you know? You'll be surprised, it makes things more interesting to watch. So there are a glut of films out there that consist of just action for the sake of action, and that gets very redundant and boring very quickly. Many would argue that guys like Freddie W, you know, found a lot of success by just doing action shorts, and I would agree, they did, but their shorts were more than just action. There was actually a lot of humor. It's more like there's action comedy. There are some shorts they've done that just explore memorably absurdist concepts. There's a lot more creativity going into their films than just action. So how many times can we start a movie off with someone waking up in bed?
World is transient.
Man, that's such an overused way to start off a film. It's just one of many cliches out there, and if you watch enough films, you'll start to recognize all of them too. You should comb through your script and through your work for cliches, because sometimes they can sneak in there without you even recognizing it. And generally speaking, if you watch a lot of movies and a lot of short films, then your cliche radar goes off quite a bit, and it's easier for you to kind of spot them, even in your own work. Now, I'm not saying that you can't use them, but what I am saying is if you are going to use a cliche, then you should try to find a way to make it interesting, find a fresh spin on it, something that would make it different than what we've seen before. Now, which would you rather watch? This or this? Probably the second one, right? Because it's more interesting, right? One sets up a mystery with the whole business with the mask, and then the other one is just some dude waking up. Pay particular attention to the first few moments of your film. You need to grab your audience with something interesting, because if you don't grab them at the beginning, they might not stick around to watch the rest of your film. Now, to be fair, I mostly see this in action short films, but sometimes I see it in dramas too. The music is either way too epic for what we're actually seeing, or the music just plain doesn't fit. The musical intensity is way up here, but what we're actually seeing story-wise in the scene is way down here. I hate to say this, but sometimes the easy choices that come to you for selecting music for your film aren't necessarily the best choices. Now, there are a lot of royalty-free music sites out there where you can kind of troll around and find music for your film, but you've got to be very selective about the music you pick on these sites because, to be honest with you, a lot of the music on them is very generic. And you also might want to consider that your film or the scene that you're thinking you might need some song for may not actually need it. I would rather have a movie with no music than generic music. So there you have it. I think it's very important and worth mentioning though that if you are learning filmmaking and you're out there making movies, you are going to make a lot of mistakes, and that's not a bad thing. That's actually a very good thing because that means that you are doing something and you are learning from it. I once heard someone say that the best thing you can do is the right thing, the second best thing you can do is the wrong thing, and the absolute worst thing you could possibly do is nothing at all. So as far as I'm concerned, as long as you're out there making films, making good mistakes, and learning from them, then you're on the right track to becoming a better filmmaker. Hands down. When I first started this whole filmmaking thing, I made a ton of mistakes. Hell, I mean, a lot of the mistakes that I made you can see in my first short film, which you can also find on my channel. And by the way, I'll leave a link in the description section for the seafood tester short film that I've been kind of talking about while we were doing this whole thing. So if you want to check that out, there'll be a link down there. Well, that's all I got for you. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like or subscribe. You can find me on the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And you can also follow me on my second YouTube channel, Darius Britt, where I chronicle my adventures with my first feature-length film, Unsound, on the film festival circuit, along with various other vlogs and live casting, so you can check that out. And yeah, I believe that's all I got for you. D-Britt out.